I was 32 years old when my world collapsed. As an architect in Boston, I had spent the past 3 years building a life with Amanda, my college sweetheart, and soon-to-be wife. We had the perfect apartment, overlooking the harbor matching careers, and a wedding venue booked for what should have been the happiest day of our lives. My brother Ethan had always been my best friend, the person I trusted most in the world besides Amanda. I never imagined my own blood would betray me so completely. Before I share how my world collapsed, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever trusted someone who shattered your heart. Subscribe to join our community of survivors who have rebuilt their lives after betrayal. I had always been the responsible one in my family. While growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I focused on my studies and worked part-time jobs to put myself through architecture school at Boston University. My parents were incredibly proud when I graduated with honors and secured a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. By 30, I had already worked on several landmark projects and was making a name for myself in the industry. I met Amanda at my friend Jack's gallery, opening 4 years ago. She stood in front of an abstract painting, her dark hair cascading down her back, completely absorbed in the artwork. When I approached and awkwardly attempted to share my interpretation, she surprised me with her insightful analysis. Amanda was brilliant, a psychology professor at a local university with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through me. Our conversation flowed effortlessly that night, and by the end of the evening, I knew she was special. Our relationship progressed naturally. We dated for a year before moving in together, combining our book collections and arguing playfully about wall colors for our new apartment. On our second anniversary, I proposed on the harbor ferry at sunset, the Boston skyline glittering behind us. Amanda cried as she said yes, and I remember thinking I had never felt more complete. My family welcomed Amanda with open arms. My parents, married for 35 years, saw in us a reflection of their own enduring love story. They hosted dinners for us, helped with wedding planning, and treated Amanda like the daughter they never had. My mother particularly bonded with Amanda over their shared love of gardening and classic literature. Then there was Ethan, my younger brother by 2 years. While I had always been steady and focused, Ethan was the wild card in our family. Throughout our childhood, I had been his protector and biggest supporter. When he got into trouble in high school, I was the one who covered for him. When he dropped out of college, I helped him find his first real job. Despite his flaws, I loved him fiercely and believed in him when others had given up. By the time Amanda and I got engaged, Ethan seemed to finally be getting his life together. He had a steady job in sales and had maintained a relationship for over a year, which was a record for him. I was proud of the man he was becoming, and never hesitated when he asked if he could stay with us temporarily after losing his apartment following a bad breakup and company layoff. Amanda suggested it actually. Family should help family, she said, squeezing my hand reassuringly. The 6 months leading up to our wedding were a whirlwind of activity. We had booked a historic mansion for the ceremony, selected a caterer known for farm-to-table cuisine, and planned a honeymoon tour of the Greek islands. Every weekend was filled with tastings, fittings, and meetings with vendors. Amanda threw herself into the planning with characteristic enthusiasm, creating detailed spreadsheets and inspiration boards. I was happy to defer to her vision, wanting only to see her smile on our big day. With my work schedule becoming increasingly demanding due to a new downtown project, I was grateful that Ethan stepped up to help Amanda with wedding errands. They would spend afternoons visiting potential florists or sampling wedding cakes, sending me pictures for approval. I trusted them both completely and was touched by how well they seemed to get along. Looking back, there were signs I should have noticed. Amanda changed the password on her phone, something she had never done before. She started taking calls in another room, claiming they were work-related. Our once passionate relationship cooled with Amanda, often claiming exhaustion from wedding planning when I initiated intimacy. We began having small arguments over insignificant things, which was unusual for us. But I attributed all of this to pre-wedding stress and remained blissfully blind to the truth unfolding right under my nose. It was exactly 2 weeks before our wedding, when my perfect life began to unravel. I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Amanda with tickets to a concert she had mentioned wanting to see. As I approached our apartment door, I heard hushed but heated voices inside. I paused, key in hand, recognizing both Amanda and Ethan's voices, though I couldn't make out their words. When I entered, they sprang apart like guilty teenagers, their conversation abruptly halting. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing Amanda's flushed face and Ethan's inability to meet my eyes. Just disagreeing about the seating chart, Amanda said quickly, forcing a smile. Your brother thinks putting your Uncle Frank next to my feminist aunt is a recipe for disaster. I accepted the explanation, kissing Amanda's cheek and dropping the topic. But something felt off, a subtle shift in the atmosphere I couldn't quite place. 3 days later, Amanda left her phone on the kitchen counter while she showered. The caterer was supposed to call with final menu options, and when her phone chimed, I picked it up intending to take a message. That's when I saw the text preview from Ethan. We need to tell him before. My heart began to pound as I opened the message thread between them, each word I read driving a stake deeper into my chest. The exchanges were intimate, secretive, filled with declarations and plans that made my stomach turn. There were references to meetups while I was working late, to feelings that had developed unexpectedly, to guilt about their connection. When Amanda emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, she found me sitting motionless at the kitchen table, her phone placed deliberately in front of me. The color drained from her face. Diego. I can explain. She started, her voice trembling. Are you sleeping with my brother? I asked, my voice unnaturally calm despite the hurricane raging inside me. She didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. Still, I needed to hear it. Answer me, Amanda. It's complicated, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. We never meant for this to happen. I left the apartment without another word, driving aimlessly around the city for hours, trying to process the betrayal. When I returned after midnight, hoping against hope, there was some explanation that could salvage everything Amanda was waiting up. But instead of the remorseful conversation I expected, she offered weak justifications about feeling neglected during the wedding planning and how Ethan had been there to support her emotionally when I was working late. I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in years. Something told me I needed more evidence, needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before confronting Ethan. I watched from my car as Amanda left for work, then followed her at a distance. Instead of turning toward the university, she drove to a hotel downtown. I waited 15 minutes before entering the lobby, just in time to see her embracing Ethan near the elevators, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The confrontation that followed in that sterile hotel lobby exposed everything. Their affair had been going on for 4 months, starting innocently enough with wedding planning outings that turned into coffee dates, then drinks, then more. As Amanda sobbed and Ethan stared at the floor, I stood paralyzed, feeling as though I was watching someone else's life implode. Then came the final blow. Diego, there's something else, Amanda said, her voice barely audible. I'm pregnant. The room seemed to tilt, and I managed to ask, already knowing the answer. It's Ethan's, she confirmed, unable to meet my gaze. I remember very little of what happened next. There was a rushing in my ears, a physical pain in my chest like nothing I'd ever experienced. I recall Ethan reaching for me, saying something about how they hadn't planned this, how it just happened, how they didn't mean to hurt me. As if intent mattered, when the outcome was my life shattered into unrecognizable pieces. I walked out without another word, got into my car and drove for hours until I found myself in a small coastal town north of Boston. I checked into a motel with an ocean view and spent that first night alone, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past months, reinterpreting every interaction between Amanda and Ethan through this new, horrifying lens. 3 years of my life of love and trust and plans for the future had been reduced to ashes in a single afternoon. The next morning, I composed a brief professional email to our wedding guests, explaining that the ceremony was canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. I contacted vendors to cancel arrangements, forfeiting deposits without concern for the money. These practical tasks gave me something to focus on besides the gaping wound in my chest. I took emergency leave from work, citing a family crisis, which wasn't far from the truth. I rented a small furnished apartment with a month-to-month lease and moved some essentials from our shared home while Amanda was at work. I couldn't bear to see her, to hear more excuses, or witness her growing pregnancy. The physical manifestation of their betrayal. The calls began almost immediately. Amanda left tearful voicemails claiming she still loved me, that the affair had been a terrible mistake, that we could work through this. Ethan's messages were equally desperate, invoking our shared childhood, calling me his best friend, even as he described how his relationship with Amanda had started as just physical before developing into something more. Each message felt like salt in an open wound. After 3 days of silence from me, Amanda showed up at my temporary apartment. I didn't ask how she found the address. She stood in my doorway, eyes red-rimmed, clutching her purse like a shield. 5 minutes, I said, letting her in but remaining standing, arms crossed. She spoke quickly, words tumbling out about hormones and confusion and feeling neglected, about how the baby complicated things but didn't have to be the end for us, about how she'd end things with Ethan if I would just give her another chance. Would you have told me if you weren't pregnant? I asked when she finally paused for breath. Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Please leave, I said quietly. Don't contact me again. The family betrayal came next, and somehow cut even deeper than Amanda's infidelity. It started with my parents showing up unannounced at my apartment, their faces grave with concern. They expressed appropriate outrage initially, my mother hugging me tightly and saying how Ethan had always been troubled, but that this was beyond understanding. My father clapped my shoulder awkwardly, offering to help me find a good lawyer to handle the dissolution of shared assets. 2 days later, they called requesting my presence at a family meeting to discuss the situation. I should have known then what was coming, but some naive part of me still believed my family would stand firmly on my side. The gathering at my parents' house included not just them, but 2 aunts, an uncle, and Ethan himself sitting shamefaced at the dining table where we had shared countless family meals. Amanda thankfully was absent. We've been talking, my mother began carefully, and we think there might be a path forward here. What followed was the most surreal conversation of my life. My family, the people who had raised me to value loyalty and honesty above all else, suggested that I consider working through this betrayal. My father spoke of the baby, my future niece or nephew, and how complicated family dynamics would be if I remained unforgiving. My Aunt Barbara mentioned couples therapy and the possibility of postponing rather than canceling the wedding. Blood is blood, my uncle said gravely. Family has to stick together through everything. I stared at them in disbelief. Are you seriously asking me to forgive Amanda and Ethan? To what step aside, so they can be together with my blessing? No, honey, my mother said, reaching for my hand across the table. Amanda made a mistake, but she still loves you. The baby complicates things, but with counseling. I pulled my hand away. She slept with my brother for months while planning our wedding. That's not a mistake. That's a series of deliberate choices. Son, my father interjected in his business negotiation voice, nobody's saying what they did wasn't wrong. But life is messy, and holding on to anger only hurts you in the long run. We're just suggesting you take some time before making permanent decisions. I looked around the table at these familiar faces, suddenly turned strange to me. Only my younger cousin Taylor, sitting quietly in the corner, seemed uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Everyone else wore expressions of reasonable concern, as if I were the one being irrational for not considering reconciliation. Something broke in me that day. The careful control I'd been maintaining since the discovery crumbled, and years of being the responsible one, the peacemaker, the brother who always forgave Ethan's transgressions, finally reached a breaking point. I stood up so abruptly my chair toppled backward. Are you all insane? My fiancé and brother betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and you're suggesting I forgive them because it's convenient for the family image. My mother flinched. Diego, that's not what we're saying. It's exactly what you're saying. I countered, my voice rising. You've always made excuses for Ethan. His poor grades, his dropping out of college, his inability to hold a job or a relationship. And now this, the one line that should never be crossed, and you're still making excuses. Ethan spoke for the first time. Diego, please, I know I messed up. Messed up. I laughed, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. You slept with the woman I was going to marry. You got her pregnant. You looked me in the eye every day for months while stabbing me in the back. That's not messing up, Ethan. That's being a terrible human being. I turned back to my parents. And you too. After 35 years of marriage, teaching us about loyalty and respect, this is where you land. Suggesting, I sweep this under the rug for the sake of family harmony. My father stood now too. You need to calm down and think rationally about this. The baby is not my responsibility, I finished firmly. That child is the result of my brother and ex-fiancé's choices. Their choices, their consequences. But you'll be its uncle, my mother pleaded. Family doesn't just disappear because of mistakes. I looked at each of them in turn, these people who had shaped my life and values, now revealing that those values had limitations I never suspected. I'm going to say this once, I said, my voice deadly calm. I will never forgive Ethan or Amanda. Not for your comfort, not for family appearances, not for the sake of a child that represents their betrayal. If you choose to support them, that's your decision. But you will lose me in the process. So choose carefully. The silence that followed was deafening. My cousin Taylor gave me a small nod of support, but everyone else seemed frozen in shock. I walked to the door, turning back one last time. When you decided to have this intervention, did any of you stop to consider how I'm feeling? Did you think about what it's like to have your future destroyed by the two people you trusted most? Or was it all about how quickly I could smooth things over and pretend nothing happened? No one answered. I nodded as if confirming something to myself. That's what I thought. Don't contact me again unless it's to apologize for this circus. I walked out, letting the door slam behind me, a symbolic punctuation to the end of family as I had known it. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. I moved through each day mechanically, barely eating, sleeping, only when exhaustion overtook me. I drank too much, ignored calls from concerned colleagues, and let my normally meticulous appearance slide. The betrayal felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. After 2 weeks of this downward spiral, I realized I was giving Amanda and Ethan even more power by allowing their actions to destroy me. In a moment of clarity, I searched online for therapists specializing in betrayal trauma and made an appointment with Dr. Martina Reyes, whose no-nonsense approach appealed to my practical nature. Your feelings are completely valid, she told me in our first session. What happened to you was a profound betrayal by the two people you should have been able to trust most. We're not going to rush your healing or suggest forgiveness as the only path forward. Those words were like oxygen after weeks of drowning. With Dr. Reyes' guidance, I began the slow process of rebuilding my sense of self, apart from the relationship and family that had defined me. Around this time, a professional opportunity I had previously declined resurfaced. A prestigious architecture firm in Seattle had been recruiting me for months, offering creative freedom and a significant salary increase. I had rejected the offer because of my ties to Boston, but now those ties felt more like shackles. After a weekend of careful consideration, I called and accepted the position, negotiating a start date 6 weeks out to give me time to wrap up my life in Boston. Amanda's attempts to contact me had grown increasingly desperate and erratic. She would alternate between tearful pleas and angry accusations, showing up at my apartment at odd hours and flooding my email with long, rambling messages. When she began waiting outside my office building, I reluctantly filed for a restraining order, feeling a strange mix of guilt and resolve as I signed the paperwork. The process of untangling our financial lives proved surprisingly straightforward. We had maintained separate bank accounts throughout our relationship, with just one joint savings account for wedding expenses that we closed and split evenly. The apartment lease was in my name, so I arranged for a subletter until the term ended. Amanda had already moved most of her things out, presumably to stay with Ethan, though I didn't ask and didn't want to know. Social media became another battlefield. Amanda posted vague, sympathetic updates about complicated situations and trying times, carefully crafting a narrative that painted her as confused and conflicted rather than deliberately deceptive. Ethan remained mostly silent online, though mutual friends reported he was telling people that their relationship had only begun after Amanda and I were having problems. I refused to engage in this public relations campaign. Instead, I posted a single factual statement. Due to personal circumstances, Amanda and I have ended our engagement. I ask for privacy during this difficult time. Then I deactivated all my accounts, cutting another cord to my old life. The day I packed up my apartment was surprisingly emotional. Each object held memories: the coffee table we had found at a flea market, and refinished together the framed photograph from our trip to Maine last summer, the collection of architecture books Amanda had gifted me on various occasions. I sorted methodically, donating furniture, selling what I could, and packing only what I truly needed for my fresh start in Seattle. That evening, I drove to a secluded beach with a small box of mementos I couldn't bring myself to keep, but didn't want to simply throw away. I built a small legal fire in one of the designated pits, and one by one consigned photographs, letters, and the small velvet box containing Amanda's engagement ring to the flames. It felt ceremonial, a necessary cremation of my past life. The cross-country drive to Seattle became an unexpected form of therapy. I took the northern route, stopping at architectural landmarks I had always wanted to visit. I spent a night in Chicago wandering the downtown area and admiring the iconic skyline. I detoured to Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone National Park, places that reminded me how small human dramas are in the grand scope of natural wonders. Each mile put physical distance between me and the betrayal, allowing me to breathe a little easier. Seattle welcomed me with its characteristic gray skies and vibrant energy. My new firm had arranged temporary housing in a sleek downtown apartment while I searched for a permanent place. I threw myself into work impressing my new colleagues with my focus and creativity. On weekends, I explored my new city, hiking the nearby mountains and discovering neighborhood cafes. Slowly, I began building a new social circle. I joined an architectural society, a weekend hiking group, and eventually a cooking class where I discovered a previously untapped talent for making pasta from scratch. These new connections knew nothing of my history accepting me, as I presented myself now rather than viewing me through the lens of my family drama. I established strict boundaries regarding contact with my family. I communicated only with my cousin Taylor, who had reached out separately to express her support for my decision. Through her, I learned that my parents were disappointed in my inability to forgive that Amanda was showing by now, and that Ethan had moved into her apartment. I listened to these updates with increasing emotional detachment, as if hearing about characters in a movie rather than people who had once been the center of my universe. When Taylor mentioned casually that Amanda had given birth to a boy they named James, I was surprised by the complex emotions that surfaced. There was pain, certainly, but also a strange sense of relief that this milestone had passed without disrupting the new life I was building. My family made predictable attempts to reconnect around holidays. There were voicemails from my mother about family being forever, and emails from my father suggesting I was being stubborn beyond reason. Around Christmas, a package arrived containing gifts and a card signed by everyone, including Ethan and Amanda. I donated the unopened gifts to a local shelter and blocked their email addresses. After 6 months of this one-sided communication, I finally agreed to a phone call with my parents, setting clear parameters in advance that we would discuss only my life, now not the past, or their relationship with Ethan and Amanda. "We miss you," my mother said, immediately, her voice catching. "I miss who I thought you were," I replied honestly, "but I'm doing well here. My work is fulfilling, I've made good friends." "When will you come visit?" my father asked, the familiar undertone of demand in his question. "I won't," I said simply. "Not as long as you maintain relationships with Ethan and Amanda. They're family too," he argued. "You can't expect us to cut them off." "I don't expect anything," I corrected him. "I'm stating my boundary. You've made your choice, and I've made mine." The call ended shortly after, with nothing resolved but everything clarified. I had given them the opportunity to choose me, and they had chosen the path of least resistance instead. It hurt, but the pain was duller, now manageable in a way it hadn't been before. 1 year after moving to Seattle, I found myself in a place I never thought possible in those dark days after the discovery. My career was thriving, with a major project downtown bearing my design signature. I had a comfortable home overlooking Puget Sound, a small but genuine circle of friends, and a growing sense of peace with my past. Through consistent therapy and personal growth work, I had learned to trust again, beginning with friendships. I approached potential relationships with caution, but not cynicism, honest about my past, but not defined by it. I had even started dating occasionally, connecting with a fellow architect named Sophia, whose patient understanding and direct communication style helped me navigate my lingering trust issues. My healing practices became rituals, weekly therapy sessions, weekend hikes, regardless of Seattle's infamous rain, and volunteer work, designing affordable housing solutions for a local nonprofit. These activities anchored me, providing purpose beyond my personal pain, and connecting me to something larger than myself. My relationship with my family remained distant, but no longer dominated my thoughts. I had chosen to write occasional letters to my nephew James that I saved in a folder unsent. I wasn't ready for contact, but I wanted him to know someday, if he ever asked, that my issues were never with him, that he was innocent in the whole mess. I didn't know if I would ever give him these letters, but writing them helped me process the complicated reality that this child born of betrayal was still my blood relation. The final test of my healing came unexpectedly during a business trip to Boston for a conference. Walking through the downtown area after a meeting, I literally bumped into Amanda and Ethan on the sidewalk. Amanda was pushing a stroller, and Ethan carried grocery bags. The shock on their faces mirrored my own. For a suspended moment, we all stood frozen, the busy city continuing to flow around our small island of shared history. I noticed with detached interest that I felt no surge of anger, no reopening of wounds, just a mild discomfort and the surreal quality of seeing characters from a previous life. Diego Ethan started his face a complex mix of guilt and hope. "How have you been? Good," I replied honestly, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Very good, actually." Amanda looked different, softer somehow, with shorter hair and tired eyes. She glanced down at the stroller, then back at me. "We heard you moved to Seattle." "Yes. Best decision I could have made." I smiled slightly, not unkindly, but with clear boundaries. The awkward silence stretched between us. Once these had been the two people I trusted most in the world. Now they were strangers wearing familiar faces. "I should get going," I said finally. "I have a dinner meeting." As I moved to step around them, Ethan reached out as if to touch my arm but stopped himself. "Diego, I know it doesn't change anything, but we're both so sorry for what happened." I looked at him, my only brother, and felt a moment of genuine sadness for all that had been lost. "You're right, it doesn't change anything." I glanced at Amanda, then the stroller. "But I hope you're both well." I mean that. And surprisingly, I did. Not because I had forgiven them, or because what they did was in any way acceptable, but because I had learned that wishing them ill only kept me tethered to the pain they had caused. My freedom came not from their remorse, but from my own decision to build a life so fulfilling that their betrayal became merely a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Walking away from that chance encounter, I felt the final pieces of my healing click into place. The greatest lesson I had learned through all of this was that self-worth should never be dependent on others' loyalty. That sometimes the bravest act of self-love is walking away from those who cannot treat you with the respect you deserve, even when those people are family. I realized the greatest betrayal would have been staying in a life designed to make everyone comfortable except me. Standing on the Boston waterfront that evening, looking across the harbor toward the airport that would take me home to Seattle, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the painful catalyst that had ultimately freed me to become a stronger, more authentic version of myself. Have you ever had to cut off family members for your own well-being? What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and healing. Share this with someone who might need to hear that sometimes walking away is the strongest choice you can make. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth is never determined by how others treat you.